Hello. Today I'm introducing a new product called Tactical Tiles. In short, it's an art pack that's intended to complement 10-minute tactical maps. It contains illustrations of all 20-something item types, known as props, including several variations of most of them. The way that Tactical Tiles is used lies somewhere between creature tokens and conventional map tiles. When 10-minute tactical maps instructs you to draw a prop, such as a cat tile patch, simply place one of these tiles onto the battlefield instead. Tactical Tiles contains letter-sized sheets of items, as well as files of individual items. The sheets can be printed to scale easily, making them ideal for physical maps. The single-item files have transparent backgrounds, making them ideal for digital maps. Tactical Tiles offers a few important advantages over using 10-minute tactical maps by itself. The most obvious one is speed. The props are already drawn, so you only have to place them. This makes a difference for all maps, but especially those which are highly reliant on props, such as forest or grassland terrain. See future videos on this channel for demonstrations. The second advantage is visual appeal. Unlike the art pieces in 10-minute tactical maps, the tactical tiles weren't drawn with a time constraint, and the difference shows. Not only are the props fully colored, but the silhouettes are more precise and the interiors are more detailed than what would be possible within 10 minutes. Third, Tactical Tiles enables you to create maps that are dynamic in the proper sense of the word. When a player pushes a boulder down a hill, burns a bush to ashes, or collapses the roof of a sinkhole, you can update the map quickly and cleanly. Because digital map making depends on the details of your map making software, I'll focus on making digital maps in this video. The first step is to print the tile sheets. To produce enough tiles to handle any terrain from 10-minute tactical maps, you might need to print multiple copies of some pages. For the durability to withstand printing, cutting, storage, and play, I recommend printing the tiles on cardstock. Regardless, use letter-size sheets to achieve a 60:1 scale. Be sure to use your printer's best settings. The difference is noticeable, as you can see here. With my printer's default settings, the colors are faded, the backgrounds are grayish, and the dark colors bleed into the light ones. In contrast, the results from the best settings look clean and bright, even from a low-end printer like mine. Once your tile sheets are printed, you'll have to cut out the items. There are several styles of cuts to choose from. You can keep the entire bleed zone, which is easiest and sturdiest, but it tends to clash with the grid. The opposite extreme is to remove as much of the background as possible. This usually looks best by far, but it's time-consuming, and it produces corners which are vulnerable to bending. The obvious compromise is to leave a thin band around the outside, but there are other options. For some props, you can cut as close as possible without curving outwards. It's easy and durable, but it can make the background of the tile difficult to distinguish from the object that it depicts. Finally, you can simply cut along grid lines. This tends to look bad by itself, but it blends into the grid nicely. Ultimately, the best option depends on both the prop and your personal preferences. For example, when cutting out deciduous trees, I prefer the hex tiles for the tiny ones, the aura or mid-crop for the large and huge ones, and a combination of hex, tile, and mid-crop for the small ones. As an aside, for the deciduous trees, I recommend chamfering the corners of the bleed zone near the tips. It looks much more visually appealing than right angles. Regardless of whether you use the tiles now or later, you'll have to store them at some point. For easy storage, clip items of the same type together using paper clips. Just don't clip tightly enough to warp the paper. Break one kind of prop into multiple stacks if necessary. There are a few reasonable ways you can take it from here. I store my bundles in labeled plastic bags. Everything except for a few of the largest tree trunks can fit inside quart-sized Ziploc bags. Consider placing the icons, such as the slope, height, and depth markers, into a pint-sized bag instead. I've bagged most of my items according to the terrain type that I most associate them with, but do whatever works for you. I also have a bag for tiles that didn't come out very well, either because of low quality printing or sloppy cutting. I'm keeping them because they could still be useful in a pinch. Once your items are sorted into bags, throw them into a gallon-sized Ziploc bag with the trees that wouldn't fit anywhere else. You might notice that some of the items, particularly the icons and the boulders, are difficult to handle individually. Consider taping or gluing them to coins to weigh them down and make them easier to grip. Unless you're making hundreds of tokens, this is, ironically, likely to be your cheapest option. Alternatively, you can use miniature plastic poker chips, or if you want to be professional, punch discs of chipboard. I'll link to a tutorial for that in the description. All of that being said, some of the height markers are simply too small to be attached to anything useful, so I regret crowding them together when designing the sheets. I plan to improve this as part of a free update, so if you purchased the product, then say subscribe to DriveThruRPG's update emails. Speaking of tactical tiles' shortcomings, I think I should point out a couple of its inherent limitations. The items are drawn on a regular hexagonal grid. Consequently, if you're using a grid that's been distorted, like the tiling patterns of LKTR Studios hex paper pictured here in the background, then the grid of the items will be ever so slightly out of proportion with the background. It's only noticeable for the largest objects, so I hope it's not too irritating. The other limitation is that the upfront cost of cutting out the items is significant. If you draw very quickly and you're highly content with the bare-bones style the 10-minute tactical maps naturally tends toward, then your time investment might not break even until you've made dozens of maps. If you're inclined to add detail to your maps, especially filling the foreground or background with colors, then it could break even after only a couple of maps. The point about background colors is worth emphasizing because tactical tiles offers another advantage over the ordinary map-making procedure. If a foreground object is drawn on colored paper, then the color of the paper distorts the color of the object. Consequently, the background must begin white, then be colored in. By contrast, when the foreground is physically separate from the background, then the background color is free to vary. In other words, tactical tiles enables us to begin our maps with colored backgrounds. This saves an enormous amount of time compared to coloring it ourselves, and it looks much more immersive than a white background does. There are a few ways to use colored backgrounds in practice, but to avoid turning this video into a review of other products, I'll save that subject for another video. That's all for today. I hope you found this video informative and that you'll consider a purchase of tactical tiles. Thank you for watching.